Today's Tanya, for the 23rd of Iyar, is at the beginning of Perek Nun Aleph, chapter 51. It's on Daf Ayin Aleph, Amud Aleph, page 266 at the bottom. In Perek Nun Aleph, the Alter Rebbe returns to the subject on which the whole Tanya is based, and that is the pasuk that says that serving God is a matter that is very close to you in your mouth and your heart to do. And the emphasis is on the doing. As the Alter Rebbe brought earlier, the statement from the Zohar that a person shouldn't walk without a head covering, without his head covered, Daled Amas, because the Shekhinah is above the head, and out of respect for the Shekhinah, you cover your head. And for this, he says that in order to bring the Shekhinah into the body, just like with a flame, in order to keep the flame connected to the wick, you have to have oil. So the body is like the wick, and the Shekhinah that rests on the head is like the flame, and in order to connect them, you have to have the oil, which is uvdan tovim, good deeds, mitzvahs, not so much the study of Torah, and not the love and the fear of God, but rather the actual doing, the uvdan tovim, the good deeds. And now in Perek Nun Aleph, the Alter Rebbe goes back to explain what it means that these good deeds make the Shekhinah present, Hashras HaShekhinah. Perek Nun Aleph. V'hinei l'teis v'zbir loshen haYenukah, a further explanation for the statement of the Yenukah, of the precocious child who was quoted in the Zohar. Tzarech levayat chilon. We have to first explain. In order to understand it, we have to first explain lahavin k'tzas, in order to understand inyan hashras hashchina, the idea that the Shekhinah rests in a given place. For example, what does it mean that the Shekhinah was present in the Holy of Holies? And in all places where we say that in this place there is the Shekhinah. For example, 10 Jews, wherever there are 10 Jews together, there is the Shekhinah. What does this mean? The whole world is filled with His presence, and there's no place where He is missing, where He is absent. So what does it mean that in this place there is the Shekhinah? The Shekhinah is everywhere. So the idea is to understand godliness, we look into ourselves. Since we are created in God's image, by looking into the relationship between the neshama and the body, between the nefesh and the body, we can understand something about God as well. So what do we see? Just as the soul fills all 248 limbs of the body, from his head to his foot, in other words, from the most refined and delicate part of the body to the most coarse and indelicate part of the body, yet, in spite of the fact that the neshama fills the entire body and treats all limbs equal, yet the main resting place and the main place for expressing itself for the neshama is b'meicha, is in the brain. And it's from the brain, from the brain it spreads to all the limbs. And every part of the body receives life from or through the brain. And it also receives the appropriate faculty. In other words, the hands, for example, receive their life from the brain, and that's life itself. And then, in addition to the life itself, there's also the particular faculty that the hand has, the koyach of movement, whereas the eye, for example, has the koyach of seeing, and the ear has the koyach of hearing, and so on. Each limb according to the way that it is composed and according to its function. the eye to see and the ear to hear, the mouth to speak, the feet to go, as we see, we see that there's a connection between the mind and all the parts of the body, because the mind feels all that happens to the 248 limbs, the kol hakeresesim, and whatever occurs with them. So the mind is connected to the body not only in a general and overall way, but it is connected in a very specific way. Which means to say that in the neshama itself, there are many parts. When the neshama gives life, we can identify a number of levels of life in the neshama itself. There's the essence, the etzem of the neshama. The etzem of the neshama is completely removed and totally uninvolved, and cannot even be considered the essence and the source of the life of the body, as if to say that the body is alive, that the essence of that life is in the neshama. The etzem of the neshama itself, cannot be described as the beginning or the source or the essence of the life that we experience in the body, because the life that we experience in the body is a finite one. It has certain physical characteristics of time and space, whereas the neshama itself, we're not even talking here about the holiness of the neshama. We're talking about the life of the neshama, the essential liveliness of the neshama. So the life of the neshama is a totally spiritual one, and is not at all involved with the life of the body. But within the neshama, there are 200 or 613 parts, 248 limbs, and 365 arteries. So corresponding to the parts of the body, there are also those parts in the neshama, as the Alter Rebbe will soon say, and those powers or those details are included, are contained in the neshama. They're not the essence of the neshama. And that can be considered, that can be described as the essence of the life of the body. So if we want to trace the life of the body back to its essence, we trace it back to these 613 parts that the neshama contains, but not to the essence of the neshama. And that's why, in certain contexts, this life that the neshama contains, that eventually will be the source of physical life, of the life of the body, this part of the neshama, that which is contained in the neshama, is sometimes described as the essence of life. Or Chassidus refers to it as chai be'etzem, that it is the essence of life. But actually, it is not the essence of the neshama. The life of the neshama is even higher. When this is described as the essence of life, it means the life of the body traced back to its essence. So the essence of the body's life is that part of the neshama that is not the essence of the neshama, but rather something contained within the neshama. And what happens is that even this part of the neshama, this life that is contained within the neshama, which is a source for the life of the body, for the physical life, is not in the neshama divided into so many and so many parts. In the neshama, it is chai be'etzem. And from it will come two kinds of life for the body. One is the overall life, the fact of life itself for the body, the fact that the foot is alive and not otherwise, and the fact that the brain is alive and not otherwise. And in this, all the limbs are equal. This is called the chayus kloli, the very condition of being alive, which the nefesh gives to all parts of the body equally. And then it gets broken down more specifically, that each limb is given a specific life. In other words, the eye, for example, is alive in a different way than the foot. Not only that it acts differently or that its function is different, but that it is alive differently. And then, in addition to the distinction and to the individual way that the different limbs are alive, there is also the obvious difference that each limb has a different function. And these are the things that the Rebbe is mentioning here. If we go over it more carefully, beginning with the line that starts with Afal Pikain, the Alter Rebbe says again, the Afal Pikain, in spite of the fact that all the limbs of the body are given life from the neshama equally, yet the main resting place for this life is in the mind, not the essence of the neshama, but the essence of the life of the body that comes to the body is in the mayach. And from the mind it comes to all the limbs of the body. So the limbs of the body receive from this nefesh two kinds of individual chayas. First, it receives life. It receives life and koyach. The life is individual to each limb. Each limb is alive in a somewhat different way from the other limbs, and then it also has a koyach that is appropriate to it. The koyach of vision in the eye, etc. And how do we see that the nefesh is the source for these individual koyachs? That the mind is the source, the life in the mind is the source for all these individual koyachs, because we see that the mind feels all that happens to all the other parts of the body. And why should the mind feel it? Because it is the origin of those koyachs. Now, ein shinui kabolas hakoyachs v'hachayis shebe'ivri haguf mitzad haneshama mitzad atzmo mehusa. These differences in the way that the life and the koyachs are received by the limbs of the body do not come from the neshama itself, from the essence of the neshama. To say that the nefesh itself, the neshama itself, is divided into 248 different parts, and that it is clothed in 248 different places, according to the different formations and parts of the body, the limbs of the body. So we can't say that. We can't say that the etzem of the neshama, that the neshama itself is divided into parts and separated into different places and to different conditions. Because by saying that, then we are attributing to the essence of the neshama a physical form. We're attributing bodily properties to the neshama. Rather, the truth is that the neshama is one indistinguishable spiritual life without recognizable parts to it. And it is far removed from any physical form. Physical form meaning more refined parts and coarser parts, higher and lower. It is also completely removed from the whole category of space and measurement, and physical limitations. By its essence, the neshama is free of any limitations of space and size and category. So the life of the neshama as it is itself is pure life, without any restrictions, without any definition. And concerning the essence of the neshama, we wouldn't be able to say that it exists more in the mind, in the brain, than it does in the feet. Since the essence of the neshama is not at all in the category, in the universe of space and limit and physical limitation, and therefore we couldn't say that it is more appropriate in the brain and less appropriate in the foot. because that would be attributing to the neshama also the distinctions and those properties that separate and make the head different from the foot. Rather, there are 613 different kinds of keiches and different kinds of life forces that are contained within the neshama, and what is there yet in the neshama doesn't yet have a recognizable breakdown of these 613 parts. Rather, they are predisposed. There is a part within the neshama that is contained within the neshama, and it is predisposed to 613 different kinds of life. And what it is a potential, a predisposition that is ready to go out and reveal itself. To reveal itself in the body and give life to the 248 limbs and the 365 arteries, which make up the body. Al yedei hislapshusam benefesh hachiyunis, through clothing itself in the natural soul, through the medium of the natural soul. Sheyesh lo gam ken remach v'shasa. The natural soul also has these 248 and 365 parts. Keiches v'chayis halol. So that when does the life of the neshama get broken down into individual types and individual parts and individual keiches? Only when it's already in the body. It's the body that gives the life, the generic, so to speak. The generic life of the neshama gets broken down into recognizable parts by the body. But how could the body do this to the life of the neshama if the life of the neshama itself is not available and is not predisposed to this kind of breakdown? That's why the Alter Rebbe says that there is a part within the neshama, there is a life that is contained within the neshama, which is not the essence of the neshama. And this life that is contained in the neshama is predisposed to 613 different types of life. And when it comes out into the body, that's when it breaks down into those individual parts, and then we have the recognizable differences between the life of one limb and the life of another, or the faculty of one limb versus the faculty of another. And in this way, the Alter Rebbe wants to explain how it is that something can be more present in one place than another, even though it is an essential oneness, a united and unified truth that is not broken down into parts, and yet you find it in one place more than in another. In the Hagim Yom, the 23rd of Iyar, the 38th day of the Eimer, the Rebbe writes that the beginning of the decline, the beginning of the end of a person's spiritual life, Rachmana litzlan, is the lack of Aveda, the lack of davening. As a result, everything becomes dry and cold, and even the mitzvahs that are already habitual, that come automatically, but even they become burdensome. Everything is rushed, and we lose our taste and our pleasure in Torah, until the atmosphere itself around the person becomes coarse. And needless to say, that in that condition we're incapable of influencing others for the good.